Excellent panel. We have one more wonderful contribution to end out our day. It's been an exciting and certainly illuminating for me exercise in understanding a little bit about things that I've long wanted to understand. And so Greg is going to wrap this up for us today. He's going to talk about a rapid, low-cost approach to sustainability, to sustainably extend life beyond Earth. Greg is an intelligent systems computer scientist and project manager extraordinaire who spent a lot of time broadly across aviation and the aerospace industry. Certainly this focus on intelligent systems and robotics, systems engineering, and all of that goes along with it. So turning it over to you, Greg, bring us home.
Thank you for those kind words. Let me see if I can get this to show. So this is meant to be a thought-provoking talk. So it's also to judge interest in this as a research area. So if you, as you go through this, say this is something that you're interested in participating in, maybe participating in a workshop, either put a message in the chat or let John and Penny know, and maybe we can do something about that. Outline that I'll be covering today is the value proposition for this, and then closed ecosystems as a space life science research tool. A machine learning approach to study these closed ecosystems, as well as to develop them, and a machine design concept to study sustainable ecosystems in space. So there's a lot of material in a short time. So let's dive in. So this is one of my favorite pictures from Cassini, taken in 2013. And of course, you see the spectacular rings, but that's not what really makes it special. And it's this pale blue dot down here. And so just putting things in perspective. So this is the Earth at about 1 billion miles away. And so that leads to some questions. And so I'll start out with an assertion that Earth's biosphere is a multi-species, self-sufficient superorganism with an unlimited lifespan. And so that's a much longer discussion, but let me just make it out to saying that species by themselves, they require inputs and they generate waste. And they're not, any one species by itself is not self-sufficient. But together, it turns out that the ecosystem on the Earth has been able to survive billions of years just because it can do that. It basically can recycle just nearly all the waste. And so the waste from one species is the nutrition for another species. And there's no sense for that this is when this really has to die. Most organisms, multicell organisms, they develop and they go through aging and then they die. But for this organism, it doesn't seem to. Now, there might be an objection saying, well, it's not really a life form because it doesn't propagate. Well, we don't know that's true. This has been going billions of years. We don't really know how it got here. And that's certainly a big question for astrobiology and what its prospects are. So that's what I'm going to focus on in this talk. Will it propagate or die? It's an open question, but could it? And is there something that humans as a species are involved in that process? And so the fundamental questions from space biology that I'll be talking about is what happens to life from Earth beyond Earth? And can a self-sufficient biome persist beyond Earth? I think people are some saying, well, yes, and others no, but we really don't know. And so that's what I'll be looking at. How can we tackle that question? I'm going to use the dandelion here as kind of a metaphor for this multi-species superorganism. And I'll get back to that by the end of the talk. It may make more sense. So zooming in from 1 billion miles away to a mere 250,000 miles, we see the Earth at Earthrise. Over 50 years ago, this image was taken. And I'll add a few more assertions. One, that the biosphere has persisted for nearly 4 billion years, but due to human mechanization, may now have reached a critical juncture in its development. And this can be for good or for bad. And it's the most sophisticated, complex, adaptive system known. And so when we would change one thing, it has all kinds of nonlinear effects in other areas. So we really have to be careful about how we proceed. And finally, to make a value judgment here, that it's extremely precious. And the value proposition is distributing multiple, sustainable, small-scale reproductions of the Earth's biosphere on and beyond Earth can help us understand it and preserve it. And so I'll be explaining what that means a little bit more. The closed ecosystems as a research discipline. And I'm using that as a kind of a less pretentious name than a superorganism. So this closed ecosystems where there's a bunch of species, we'll talk a little bit more, work together. There's three different disciplines I'll be focusing on, and I think it's part of this as a integrated research discipline. There's the space life sciences, which is the focus of this workshop. There's also the intelligent systems piece, and the intersection of those two areas is what kind of this today's session is about. And I'll add a third area, that's spacecraft technologies. And at the intersection of all three, you see is for CESs. Now, what I mean by this superorganism, on the Earth's biosphere, it's comprised of a number of different organisms, and this is from a paper. Now, the microbes, that's probably the least certain number on here. We have a pretty good handle on what the human mass is, but the main point is that it's just basically dwarfed in comparison to all the other organisms on the Earth, and yet we as humans have to have a particular impact. Even among animals, you may not be able to see this on the graph, that the animals are all in the yellow triangle, and the very peak of that, it's much smaller than even the arrowhead, is what humans' mass represented. And this is putting the Earth's biomass as basically 500 billion metric tons, and the fact that the humans are kind of at the top predators, that has been an unstable position over the Earth's lifespan. So it's by no means certain that we're going to retain that position. And so a lot of people have claimed that we've got too many people. Well, maybe it's just that we're just not operating in a sustainable manner. And so we'll be exploring that a little bit further. And so another way to basically look at this is to break this up into biomes. And there's been some work over the years and saying, well, based on the temperature and the precipitation in different periods of the Earth, that we kind of see the same type of flora and fauna. And although there's no walls in most cases, sometimes there's mountain ranges or oceans, but we do have kind of actually loosely coupled modules that the Earth operates in. It allows it to be very robust and to adapt to changes quickly. So work on this was done by Whitaker. This is called the Whitaker diagram for those in the community, basically capturing the different types of biomes and how they're related to the mean precipitation and the annual temperature. Basically making the point that just by changing the mean precipitation and the annual temperature by just a little bit, you get a whole different kind of range of flora and fauna that flourish. So as we basically look at life on and beyond Earth, all this, the biosphere that we're familiar with operates at 1G. So you can look at it as a thin skin on this 3D graph where gravity is the third dimension. And we really don't know much about what above it and below it, at least not in the long term, other than that, at least for short periods, many plants and animals can survive, but we really don't know how they would evolve in the longer term. But if we know how sensitive life is to adapting to change, and we know by changing gravity, it's going to change everything. It's going to change how animals walk or run or fly or swim or climb, how high they can grow. So there's a number of different factors that change once you change the gravity level. And so although they're not planets with higher gravity that we might be interested in, there certainly are a number that are lower gravity. And so how do we explore that? And how will they evolve over time? So closed ecosystems just as a way to do that. And by this, I mean a community of organisms that persist typically over multiple generations in a sealed volume such that mass is not added or removed. The mass required, the food, the air, the water, by the organisms is continually recycled from the mass produced, their waste by those same organisms. energy and information may be transferred to and from a CES. So this is not saying this is not like perpetual motion. You can add energy as well as information for controlling this and observing it. CESs that support mammals indefinitely remain speculative, other than the Earth itself. And the combinations of minimum required mass, volume, and the recipe of species that you'd have to mix together for millions CESs are unknown. A CES is a useful spacecraft payload because of the scarcity and high value of mass in space. Resupplying the payloads with products from Earth and disposing of waste byproducts are not required. And so this lowers the cost as well as increases the duration of these missions. CES is capable of supporting mammals, significantly reduce the cost of space habitats, enabling very long research of mammals subject to various gravity and radiation levels. CESs hold this prospect of sustainably establishing life beyond Earth. And so that's kind of what I'll be trying to persuade you of in the remaining slides. So here is a simple example of what I mean by closed ecosystem. So we can start out with basically phytoplankton and zooplankton. And so just even that itself, you can make that its own little ecosystem, but then you can expand it by adding fish and then rodents as well as weasels as predators for the rodents. And then we have all the decomposing fungi and bacteria, and for nitrifying it, basically reconvert these resources over again. And so not only are we basically transferring the various resources, but we're closing the various key cycles, the water cycle, the carbon cycle, the nitrogen cycle, and the various minerals that they need. And the control objective is to maintain species population cycles. Now, we're not expecting the various species to maintain constant. We expect kind of ebb and flow. Particularly predator and prey would be out of phase as the food supply grows, those that consume the food would grow, and then the predators for those would grow. And then as that goes down, then the predators would go down, and then we have a kind of recovery. The main point is to make sure that we don't have extinction events within the CES, because that basically will start reducing the chance that the CES will continue. So is this new? No, we've been working on this at least at a certain level of effort for many years. NASA had in the early 80s, part of the life sciences division supported an effort in self-contained ecosystems and had a workshop held at JPL on closed system ecologies. And part of that, there was developed concepts for sealed systems. So in the picture on the right here, that is a totally sealed globe, basically about 2/3 water, 1/3 air. And it has algae, some microbes, and brine shrimp, and they can persist for years. And this business that currently is available, they've sold over 1 million of these uses, various sizes and shapes, but basically the recipe is pretty much the same, even though it's been going on for that long. In '86, Carl Sagan, so you may call him from Cosmos, a pale blue dot, wrote a magazine article titled "The World That Came in the Mail" about this ecosystem. So he received this, and he stated that such systems are being perfected and will play a key role in the future exploration of the solar system. So I think he saw the possibility of what this type of work can bring, but unfortunately, work in expanding this is kind of stalled since then. And so part of what I'm trying to see is that they're interested in moving forward in this area and to create the complexity of ecosystems as well as instrument them with sensors and actuators to be able to control in a wide and collect data over a wide variety of systems. And how we do this is, I won't go through each of these, but there's a wide number of ways you can put sensors, and then you have actuator candidates, as well as other things that you can basically put these, instrument this biome area in some sealed area and have equipment associated with that particular biome. And then we can connect these modules, just as the different biomes on the Earth are connected, we can connect these into an entire colony, and so that various resources can be exchanged between the modules, so that the buildup of CO2 or oxygen or the water or the various elements. And so you can have terrarium elements where you focus on terrestrial plants, as well as aquariums, the focus on aquatic. And the planetarium basically is kind of a commons area where you have both the terrestrial plants, animals, the aquatic, interacting, the reptiles, And so how can this be used? So do this. Once you start collecting all this data from just one CES, and by CES, each one has a number of modules. So here I'm representing in the gray boxes that those combination modules is one. And you can distribute these CESs not only all over the country or all over the world, but in space as well eventually. And so they'd be continually generating data. And so this data goes into a evolutionary compute system, a machine learning AI system that collects this data, performs pattern recognition. There's optimizing planning to actually send controlling to actually, whether it's either suggestions that can be optionally taken by people who control the systems, or it can actually control these CESs to change the temperature, change the flow rates, whatever, to be able to keep it healthy or perform experiments. And it has basically a model library of, so it's actually modeling CESs so it can make predictions. Oh, if I do take this particular control action, I expect to see these particular sensor readings over time. And if I see something different, then I can learn and update my model accordingly. So I simulate these various modules into the future to be able to make predictions on this. So I could spend a lot of time going into this in more detail, but for the sake of time, let's move on. That given that we can start developing these modules to say, we've got confidence that we can keep these closed ecosystems alive, at least for a few years on Earth, then well, why can't we basically put them in space? And part of this is to propose a spacecraft that has a 150 centimeter radius centrifuge, as well as basically two kilotons and 3 kiloliters for the bioscience payloads, allow it to persist for at least 5 years, and use that as to collect the data. And then have similar versions on the Earth of the same payloads under 1G gravity and see how that compares, and also Earth radiation. And so it could be in a variety of orbits, but the one I'm proposing for this mission is shown by the orange orbit. And it would be launched basically into a geosynchronous orbit, which is the purpose secret. To just understand this graph a little more, Earth is the blue circle, and the larger gray donuts are the inner and outer Van Allen belts, which aren't perfectly circles, but that's because of the solar wind, but that's just a representation. Then you have the moon way out almost at 400,000 kilometers. And these are to scale as far as the size of the moon and the distance from the Earth. The spacecraft here is the outside view. Basically, solar panels that are surrounded the inner centrifuge unit, and connected to the centrifuge unit, which is the bus. The bulk of the mass of it, over 12 times, is 12 times the mass is in the actual radiation shielding around the centrifuge, to be able to bring the radiation levels down so that you can have payloads that live for 5 years or more. And it can also update the artificial gravity level by changing rotation. Now, one of the things that people who pose artificial gravity, and it's fortunate we haven't been able to do more of this work, is that if you spin stabilize a spacecraft, that's very good if you want to basically keep it from changing the attitude, but it makes the attitude very propulsion intensive to change. And for this, you want to be able to change the attitude to keep the panels on sun and the radiators away from the sun. And so you need to continually be able to do that. And the only way to do that without requiring a lot of propellant is that basically you zero out the angular momentum. So you don't end up having the gyroscopic forces. And that you do that by having the radiation shield counter rotate with respect to the centrifuge. And because it's 12 times more in mass, it basically would counter rotate 12 times as slowly. And for this particular design, and there's flexibility in how this is done, is that the rim, you'd have 6 350-liter payloads, and that would be at the 100% of the artificial gravity level that's generated, and then 6 spokes. Each one consists of 6 54-liter payloads at 80%, 60%, and 40% as they get closer to the center of the centrifuge. And why do you need all these different payloads? Well, you can provide experimental variety, you can enter multiple questions, you can do repeatability. So if it happens once in one payload, well, would it happen again? Do you have to do another mission, or can you just have another payload operating under the same conditions and see if the results are repeatable. You can separate the various specimens, and the equipment itself can be redundant, so that you might have a failure, but another system won't fail. And you can also vary the radiation shielding and the gravity level, otherwise identical payloads. And you also increase the stakeholders, so you can allow multiple organizations to participate in a single mission. So here's a top view of you see the 6 rim payloads. It's R1 through R6, and the 6 spokes, and the center hub. And at the end of these, we have auto balancers, because as the mass can be moved between the various modules, and the animals themselves may move, can cause disturbances, kind of like as the washing machine kind of gets out of balance. Until be able to stop that, you have basically auto balancers to make sure that that's minimized. Here's a side view, basically a lot of the same system. Here you can see basically where the suggested radiation shield is primarily a tungsten alloy, and you're getting 108 grams per centimeter squared of shielding with 6 centimeter thickness. And so that's about like a meter worth of water comparatively. And so it's typically on an aircraft or spacecraft, you've got maybe 3 millimeters of your aluminum shielding, which is much thinner than the tungsten. So, and I'm not going to go through the radiation analysis in a longer version of this talk. I do that. Also, the artificial gravity. This is basically you see that the basic equations here. Don't go into detail, but in order to get 1 G at the zero level at this radius, you're rotating at about 24 RPM. And if you want to bring it down to a lower level, that's more interest. So you get at the zero level, you have essentially Mars gravity, and then you have something closer to the lunar gravity at the level 3. Then you're down at 14 RPM, and you can change these if throughout the mission if that's so desired. There's just a breakout of what 350 is. It basically converts to 92 gallons, if that's more helpful to understand the capacity, as well as the spoke modules. And this is basically was a candidate was the Falcon X Heavy for it. And although it basically uses up the entire payload mass of the Falcon Heavy to get it into GTO, if it's more important to reduce the more important to increase the radiation protection, you can reduce either the orbit or the propellant. And so there's some flexibility in that respect. Just to quickly summarize, closed ecosystems can be used as spacecraft payloads to study the long-term effects of various gravity and radiation environments on life over multiple generations, subject to natural selection. So here you're allowing the various species to interact. Because to study a species by itself, you really don't understand it until you understand how it interacts with the other species. A population of small CESs on Earth can be used to generate data without direct human interaction, can be continually optimized by intelligent modeling system. The CES modeling the species based on the data. So here we have this machine, the evolutionary comprehension machine learning system I described. Small CES can be combined or expanded to very large sizes. I didn't really talk in much detail about how the scaling on this, but on Earth you can continue to increase the size of these CESs so that from small mammals to large, eventually to people. And the same notion is once you show that you can have these closed sequences on Earth, certainly you can have them in space. And then once you show they can be anywhere in space, even just starting in LEO, being able to put them anywhere else in space becomes much more plausible. And finally, just the power of small. They all can begin by collecting data from worlds that so small that they can come in the mail that Carl Sagan mentioned in '86. Just leave you with this dandelion as a metaphor for the Earth deploying CESs. And I don't know if we have time for questions, but I appreciate your attention. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Greg. That was a great overview of your thinking. I'm sure that there are lots of questions. We are out of time. But Sandy, if you're there, I noticed that there were a few comments specifically, I think by Jay Bookbinder, specifically related to Greg's presentation. If you're there, could you read those for us?
Oh, and so, Greg, I got any counter rotation. Let's chat from Ignacio. Is there a way to leverage a closed loop system in a simulated environment to find the optimal set of control inputs by emulating all possible combinations and optimizing for a known reward function?
So I think you're going into a little bit more detail of the system I was describing, that it actually does attempt to simulate it. Now, saying for all possible combinations, that's probably not possible, and that just to be able to do it for a single organism, let alone a population of organisms, many of the microbes, we have even no idea what they are. But so you basically start with pond water and show, well, at least it allows these fish to persist for years. And then we can use microscopes to be able to take statistical samples of what's in there. So there's a way to study it. But I think I concur what the approach is, and that's what I'm proposing.
Okay, it all starts with pond water. Jay has a comment. I'm unclear as to why you would reduce the radiation effects.
Why to reduce the radiation effects?
I'm unclear why you want such a deep space orbit if you are then removing the radiation effects.
So one is to basically study what life is beyond the Van Allen belts. So if we can do that, now, so radiation, I didn't really go into detail of different types of radiation and how they have different effects, but basically through the Human Research Program, my discussions with them is one of the biggest oppositions to artificial gravity, and why they've told the Space Technology Mission Direction not to research that is because radiation is much too big of a problem. Nobody's going to be able to live in space long enough to need solve the artificial gravity problem. And so we're trying to get beyond that, saying, is it really too much to ask for both radiation protection and artificial gravity? We know that the gravity itself has some very, particularly in microgravity, has very negative effects on life. But we don't know to what extent that might not apply, certainly to humans, but we don't know how it extends to all. So why do we still have radiation protection when we don't go beyond the Van Allen belt? It's still going to get through. Even with that much radiation protection, you're still going to pick up a lifetime of radiation within the 5 years. At least you're not getting it within the 6 months. And so you can do longer term study. As well as make sure that you if you end up having birth defects right off the bat, then you're going to have a very short mission.
Thank you, Greg. Penny, we've got 2 more comments. Do we have time?
Yeah, we're over time, but if people have had to drop out, they're already gone. So let's stick it out for those, and then I'll turn it over to John for a couple of more closing words.
Okay, from Ignacio. Here's a recent paper. The authors, Oxford and Stanford, are part of the FDL facility. Up to 2 billion times acceleration of scientific simulations with deep neural architecture search. And I have a URL for that. And then a final comment from Nikunj. Reinforcement learning does not need to try all possible combinations. Practical algorithms use function approximation to learn functions that map control inputs to the reward, and so can try inputs that are more spread apart.
Yep, that's correct. And I would basically make the same thing about evolutionary computation.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Okay, one last comment from Diana to Ryan, Jay, and Penny's point about incentivizing. I think as data sharing becomes more of a norm, we'll also see mechanisms within the field develop to encourage this. Having someone else work on your data set should count at least as much as, if not more than, someone citing your paper. but not everyone's performance career metrics currently take. And that's it.
Thanks, Sandy. Thanks again, Greg. That was very illuminating. I really appreciate you jumping on here. Yep, that was very helpful. John, let me turn it over to you for a few closing words. And thanks, everybody, for your participation.
Thanks, everyone. This has been a really exciting and interesting, eye-opening and inspiring workshop on artificial intelligence, machine learning, and big data, and how we can apply it. In our last talk that we just heard about closed ecologies, this would be a great way to explore how we can implement this kind of technology, both in ground studies or perhaps in lunar or Mars gravity-like environments. And so I would just like to simply say thanks to all the panelists, all the speakers. This has been very informative. Thanks to Penny for all the support, as well as the team behind the scenes who've been capturing all these ideas, Ed Grulish and Melissa Curran Brooks, as well as Ricky Guest, who's been in charge of managing all of the different presentations and slide clicks and so on. So thank you very much, everyone. And Penny, if you have no other thoughts, I think this sixth workshop is complete.
My brain is full. I have no other thoughts.
Right, and we are still planning on having one more workshop, and that will be on July 1st on strategy and aspects related to facilities and capabilities and building the community as we envision this really interesting intersection and integration of life sciences in space. Thank you very much, everyone. Have
Thanks,
a great
Scott.
day.
Bye-bye, everybody.